What if the betrayal wasn't emotional this time but financial? Because according to what's now being alleged, this situation didn't unravel through text messages, hotel rooms, or secret phone calls. It unraveled through something far more deliberate: money. Whispers started circulating that Kirk Frost had access to a separate bank account, one that wasn't family-facing, wasn't business-facing, and allegedly wasn't meant to be discovered. And the name tied to that account immediately raised eyebrows: Jasmine Washington. If true, this wasn't about one mistake, it was about infrastructure, because secret accounts don't exist by accident. They're planned, maintained, funded quietly over time. And when finances get hidden, it suggests something emotional already crossed a line long before the paperwork did. That's where Rashida comes back into focus. According to the narrative circulating online, once the account was discovered, there was no screaming match caught on camera. No dramatic meltdown. Instead, there was something colder and far more final: control. The allegation is that Rashida didn't argue, she didn't negotiate. She acted. Every penny allegedly tied to that account was transferred out swiftly, decisively, leaving no ambiguity about where authority now sat. If true, that move wasn't revenge, it was a statement. Because when someone cuts off access to money, they're not just ending a relationship, they're dismantling leverage. They're saying this system no longer benefits you. And that's why this story feels heavier than previous scandals. This wasn't about embarrassment, it was about exposure. Because once finances enter the conversation, intentions stop being debatable. Numbers don't have tone. Accounts don't lie about planning. And if this account really existed, it suggests a level of premeditation that changes how everything else gets reinterpreted. So the real question isn't whether this allegation is shocking. It's whether this was the moment Rashida stopped reacting and started reclaiming control. Once money entered the conversation, everything changed. According to what's being alleged, this wasn't a situation uncovered through gossip or jealousy. It surfaced through patterns: irregular transfers, unexplained balances, and financial behavior that didn't match what Rashida believed was happening inside her own marriage. And that's why this claim hit harder than any cheating rumor before it. Because emotions can be denied, messages can be explained, but money leaves a trail. The allegations circulating online suggests that a separate account existed, one not tied to joint finances, not connected to public business entities, and not openly disclosed. What raised alarms wasn't just the account itself, but where the funds were allegedly going. The name that kept coming up in whispers and side conversations was Jasmine Washington. If true, that connection reframes everything. Secret accounts don't exist for convenience. They exist for control. They allow someone to move resources without oversight, to maintain independence from shared decision-making, and, most importantly, to preserve leverage in situations where transparency would invite consequences. That's why this allegation feels different from past scandals involving Kirk Frost. Those were framed as personal failures. This one, if accurate, suggests planning. Planning implies intent. According to the narrative being discussed, the discovery didn't come with immediate confrontation. It came with verification, balances checked, transfers reviewed, questions asked quietly before any public reaction. And once enough aligned to remove doubt, the response wasn't explosive, it was procedural. That's where Rashida's alleged move stands out. Instead of arguing, she allegedly acted within the financial structure she already had access to. Funds were reportedly moved. Access was reportedly cut. The alleged account was neutralized not through drama but through authority. If true, that decision wasn't emotional, it was administrative. And administrative actions send the clearest messages because they don't ask for agreement. What complicates this further is how it lines up with previous dynamics involving Jasmine. Her presence has always sat uncomfortably close to unresolved tension. According to viewers, moments that once felt ambiguous now invite reinterpretation when money is added to the equation. Why certain reactions felt confident. Why certain boundaries felt loose. Why certain silences felt protected. Money doesn't create those dynamics, but it explains how they're sustained. Another reason this allegation gained traction is timing. It didn't surface during peak drama, it surfaced after patterns had already been noticed. That sequencing matters. When financial claims appear late, they often arrive as confirmation, not accusation. Still, it's important to underline what this is and isn't. No verified documents have been released publicly. No official statements have confirmed these claims. Everything remains alleged. But allegations involving money tend to linger longer than others because they raise a different kind of question. If this isn't true, why hasn't it been clearly denied? Silence in financial matters carries more weight than silence in emotional ones. Because if a claim is false, a simple clarification often resolves it. When clarification doesn't come, speculation fills the gap. And speculation around finances escalates quickly, especially when public figures are involved. For Rashida, the alleged response, moving funds instead of confronting publicly, fits a pattern viewers recognize. She has historically chosen containment over chaos, control over confrontation. If this story is accurate, it would align with that approach. For Kirk, the alleged silence around the financial specifics invites interpretation. Not confirmation, but interpretation. And interpretation is what reshapes public perception over time. This is why the money angle refuses to die down. It suggests not just betrayal but structure. A structure that required maintenance, that required secrecy, that required intention. And when intention is implied, past behavior starts to look less accidental. The biggest shift here isn't about guilt or innocence, it's about power. If Rashida truly transferred every penny tied to that account, the message wasn't about punishment. It was about ending dependency, ending leverage, ending a system that benefited one side quietly. And systems don't fall apart emotionally, they fall apart financially. When trust breaks emotionally, relationships sometimes survive. When trust breaks financially, everything changes. That's why this allegation, if true, hits at the foundation of the marriage between Rashida and Kirk Frost in a way past scandals never did. Cheating accusations create emotional chaos. Secret money creates structural damage. Because money isn't just currency in a marriage, it's power, planning, and foresight. A hidden account suggests decisions were being made outside the partnership. And once that line is crossed, reconciliation stops being about forgiveness and starts being about control. That's why the alleged response matters more than the allegation itself. If Rashida truly transferred every penny tied to that account, the action wasn't impulsive, it was corrective. It re-established authority in a space where authority had quietly been bypassed. And once authority is reclaimed financially, the emotional balance shifts permanently. From that point forward, the marriage isn't operating on trust, it's operating on terms. Those terms don't need to be announced publicly to be felt. They show up in access, in who approves what, in who controls movement, financial and otherwise, and according to the narrative that control shifted decisively. This is why viewers noticed a change in tone afterward. Not louder arguments, not dramatic exits. A colder calm. Cold calm usually means decisions have already been made. For Kirk, the implication of a secret account changes his position inside the marriage. Instead of being a partner, he becomes someone under oversight. And oversight changes behavior, not because of fear but because options narrow. Financial independence creates leverage. Financial restriction removes it. That's the reason this allegation feels final even without confirmation. Because if the funds were moved, the system that allowed secrecy no longer exists. And without that system, previous patterns can't function the same way. The dynamic doesn't reset, it restructures. For Rashida, this alleged move also signals something else. Boundary enforcement without negotiation. Not asking for explanations, not waiting for accountability to be offered, acting within her rights and moving forward from there. That approach aligns with how she's handled business for years. She doesn't lead with emotion. She leads with execution, and execution doesn't invite debate. This is also why reconciliation, if it happens, wouldn't look the way it did before. You can forgive an affair and continue as equals. You can't easily unsee financial deception and return to blind partnership. From this point on, any reconciliation would come with conditions, formal or informal, transparency, oversight, separation of assets. And conditions change relationships fundamentally. They replace assumption with verification. That's not bitterness, that's realism. Another reason this moment feels irreversible is public perception. Once fans believe money was hidden, trust in intent erodes faster than trust in emotion. The audience stops asking why and starts asking how long. How long was this planned? How long was this funded? How long did secrecy benefit one side? Those questions don't fade with apologies. And for Jasmine, if her name truly connects to this allegation, the implications extend beyond personal drama. Financial involvement suggests dependency, not coincidence, and dependency reshapes how past interactions are interpreted. Confidence looks different when money is involved. Silence looks protected. Distance looks funded. That's why this story refuses to stay in the realm of rumor. It challenges the idea that past scandals were isolated. It suggests continuity, a system that operated quietly until it didn't. And when systems collapse, they don't do so emotionally. They collapse when resources are cut. This is the point where marriages either fully reset or quietly end. Not with announcements, with restructuring. If Rashida did reclaim every penny, the message wasn't just for Kirk. It was for herself. A declaration that whatever happens next will happen on her terms, not within a structure she didn't authorize. And once that line is drawn, it's rarely erased. Once the money allegations surfaced, the focus didn't stay on the account for long. It shifted to behavior. Because when finances are involved, people stop debating emotion and start watching reactions. And in this case, the reactions, or lack of them, said more than any statement could. For Jasmine Washington, the allegation changed her position in the narrative immediately. Before, her presence existed in a gray area, complicated, controversial, but still dismissible as personal history. Once money was attached, that ambiguity narrowed. If true, financial connection suggests dependence. Dependence suggests planning, and planning invites scrutiny. What stood out wasn't a loud defense or denial, it was quiet, no immediate clarification, no clear rejection of the claim, no attempt to shut down the narrative directly. That silence didn't confirm anything, but it fueled interpretation. And interpretation is what reshapes public sympathy. Viewers began revisiting old scenes with new context. Moments that once looked casual now felt calculated. Reactions that once seemed confident now felt protected. And confidence without accountability rarely reads well once money is involved. This is where public perception tilted. Sympathy consolidated around Rashida, not because of spectacle but because of restraint. She didn't posture. She didn't escalate. According to the narrative, she acted quietly and decisively. That kind of response resonates with audiences because it signals agency, not victimhood. Silence in her case looked intentional. By contrast, silence from others looked evasive. That contrast matters. In public scandals, silence isn't judged evenly. It's judged based on who benefits from it. When silence appears to protect power or access, it's read as strategic. When it appears to protect boundaries, it's read as strength. The aftermath also highlighted something else: fatigue. Audiences are tired of emotional apologies that don't change behavior. They're tired of cycles that reset without accountability. When money enters the picture, it feels like the final line, because finances require intention to hide and effort to maintain. That's why this allegation stuck. It reframed everything that came before it. Cheating accusations looked less like mistakes and more like symptoms. Silence looked less like maturity and more like insulation. And calm reactions looked less like growth and more like containment. This is also why no one rushed to both sides the story. Financial secrecy isn't subjective. Either access existed or it didn't. Either funds moved or they didn't. And the absence of clarity created a vacuum the public filled quickly. For Kirk Frost, the situation became less about defending character and more about explaining structure. And explaining structure requires detail that never came. So the story shifted from what happened to what didn't. No bank statements released, no direct denials, no timeline corrections, just quiet. And quiet in this case felt heavy. The larger implication here is power redistribution. If Rashida truly reclaimed financial control, the dynamic changed permanently. Public or private, reconciliation or separation, nothing moves forward the same way once leverage is removed. And that's why the story slowed instead of escalated. Systems don't scream when they collapse, they go still. That stillness is what people are reacting to now, not the allegation itself, but the absence of movement afterward. No pushback, no correction, just distance. Distance is revealing. At this point, the noise has faded, but the consequences haven't. If the allegation is accurate, the shift didn't happen emotionally. It happened structurally. And structure is where arguments end because structure determines access. Once access changes, behavior follows. For Rashida, the quiet response reads as finality, not because a marriage can't continue, but because it can't continue the same way. Financial transparency becomes non-negotiable. Oversight replaces assumption. Any reconciliation, if it exists, would be conditional, measured, verified, and bounded. That's not punishment, that's prevention. For Kirk Frost, the implications are different. Allegations involving hidden finances don't invite emotional apologies, they invite explanations. And without explanations, reputation shifts subtly but permanently. Calm no longer reads as maturity, it reads as containment. Public trust erodes quietly. For Jasmine Washington, the silence carries the most weight. When money is attached, even allegedly, ambiguity shrinks. Viewers stop debating intent and start debating proximity. Past moments get reinterpreted, confidence gets relabeled, and absence of denial becomes a signal, not a conclusion, but a signal. This is why money changes everything. Cheating allegations ask for forgiveness. Financial secrecy demands control. Once finances are restructured, the power dynamic resets. Arguments don't escalate because there's nothing left to argue over. The system that enabled secrecy, if it existed, no longer functions. And without a functioning system, old patterns can't repeat. That's why the aftermath feels still. Not healed, not resolved, contained. Containment is often mistaken for peace. It isn't, it's a pause enforced by boundaries. And boundaries, especially financial ones, don't announce themselves, they operate. Whatever happens next will likely stay quiet, no dramatic posts. No public ultimatums, just distance, oversight, and decisions made away from cameras. That's how real consequences show up when money is involved. Because money doesn't argue, it reallocates. This story was never just about cheating. It was about infrastructure. If these claims are true, the most important moment wasn't the reveal, it was the response. Because when someone chooses structure over spectacle, they're not reacting. They're resetting the board. So ask yourself this: if secrecy requires funding, what else requires maintenance? When silence follows financial allegations, who does it protect? And when access is cut, does behavior change, or does distance become permanent? Because in relationships, emotions start arguments. Money ends them. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Share this before it disappears from the timeline. And remember, the loudest betrayals aren't always emotional. Sometimes they're funded.